Hello everyone, my name is Elle. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be answering some questions you guys had for me in regards to my Pan That palette 2016 with the Vice LTD. Lisa asked, what palettes did you use most often to complement this one? So for those of you who might know, I did pan the Urban Decay Naked Basics alongside this because I really needed transition shades. I really needed matte shades to go with this because there's so much glitter, so much sparkle. I love using satin shades in my crease, but there were very few of these in this palette. This was a huge glitter bomb of a palette, so I really needed a lot of matte ones. So I did do my Pan That palette with the Urban Decay Naked Basics, and then I did my Pan That palette where I was using a few other ones. So I did end up repurchasing the Naked Basics palette, so this is my new one. So that's like the shadows in there that I used often. Now my Naked Basics palette, when I started to pan it, had a lot of use on it already, so it wasn't that hard really to finish it. But these, especially these like lighter 5 shades, were really useful and really great for creating looks with the Vice palette. And then I also used the Naked 2 Basics palette, which I hit pan on with the second part of my small Pan That palette, my Pan That palette mini. These are really great because then I can do more cool toned looks. I also used the Becca Ombre Rouge palette, which does have more like satiny shades than straight up mattes, but I use these as well, especially like when we got into like the summer fall time. And the Pure palette, same sort of thing, these beautiful like summery fall shades that just were very complimentary to me and to that palette. Outside of those ones, I reached for a variety of palettes depending on what I had newly bought, because I did buy some new palettes last year, like the Modern Renaissance palette. I did reach for this one, and because I wanted to use it, so I just used it in conjunction with the Vice as much as possible. So like I haven't hit pan on any of these shades, but I have really good dips in Primavera and Vermeer because these two like very neutral shimmery shades were very good, especially once I started to get through some of the other shades in the Vice LTD. Like there are shades like Provocateur and Last Sin, which kind of in the same vein as Primavera and Vermeer, so I could use these ones like in substitution. There's also some really good matte shades in here that I could use for transition tones. I also use things like the Sweet Peach palette from Too Faced. Like there was a bunch of my palettes I tried using like whenever I could to pull in different colors as I needed them. What other kinds of shades did you pull in? So like I mentioned, mostly matte, light neutral shades, transition shades especially were very much necessary for me. Various matte colorful shades, like I talked about doing a pink in the crease and a purple on the lid, which I really liked, and I used like a couple of singles for that, especially using up the purples that were in here. So like it's a wide variety of shades to create looks with this palette. At what point were you pulling in not project shades more than the shades in the palette? That would really have been once I got down to the last few shades. Like there was a point when I think I had the green, the blue, the 2 purples, the black, the brown. I was using a lot of neutral shades, especially at that point, and a lot of other colors to complement and coincide with those other shades. Amber F said that she was curious to hear if panning a neutral palette versus panning colorful shades was easier to keep motivation or harder. So right now, I would have to say that it was easier to keep my motivation because I was able to bring in so many other shades and I was able to use so much with that palette, and I really like colorful looks, so it wasn't like a challenge for me, and I don't mind doing different things, so it wasn't a struggle. It's not like I was a 100% neutral palette wearer, and so that would have been a lot harder for me. I found like the Naked palette, panning that was a lot harder, but that also had a lot to do with the formula issues and the fact that I didn't like the Naked palette that much. The more I used it, the more I hated it, and I definitely felt differently about the Vice LTD. I struggled near the end because of what was left, but the majority of the time using it, I really enjoyed it, and it was not a struggle at all. It got harder near the end, but long term it was easier to keep my motivation than with a straight up neutral palette. Grinch2466 asked, how long did it take you to pan the Vice palette? So it was I want to say 14 months, just to kind of round up, we'll say 14 months, because I started using it actively at the end of December 2015, and I finished at the beginning of February 2017, so we'll just say 14 months. Lucia Tepper Beauty asked, how do you manage to use other shadows in your collection while struggling to use up an entire palette? So like I mentioned earlier, pulling in shades from other palettes and my singles helps a lot, and also using my filming time to break away from my panning items was a huge help for me. That's not really going to be good advice for the majority of people who don't do this, but that's what helped me, because I had that time to like play around and use different things, and I would use what I did during my filming time, whatever inspiration I drew from there, and then I could put that to like day-to-day use. So if I was really feeling a certain kind of color scheme or a certain style of look, I would just go hard for the video and do like the light version, whatever I could come up with majority using the Vice palette. So that was very helpful for me, and that helped keep me going. Katie asked, looking back, would you have still picked this palette to pan? I think yes, I would. Knowing what I know now, absolutely. If I had to go back and I didn't know what I know now, I don't know if I would have. You know, it's one of those things where I wasn't quite sure what I was getting into when I decided to pan this. Like, it was a very ambitious thing that I took on, and I think if I knew the end result, if I knew the end result was going to be worth it, I would absolutely do it. Ezra617 asked, do you have any regrets about panning this palette? I don't have any regrets about panning this palette. I do kind of regret forcing myself to work on those shades that I hated, because it really wasn't worth it. It just made me kind of angry. And so I kind of regret that I forced myself to do that, but at the same time I really wanted to finish the palette entirely and not just be like, hey, I kind of half finished these 3 shadows but I'm done. Would you have done something a different way? Probably not. Really, probably not. As much as I kind of regret spending time on those shades that I didn't like, I was going to finish them regardless, because that was the goal I had set and that's what I wanted to accomplish. Not even so much thinking about other people and wanting to finish it for other people, like people watching. I just wanted to finish it for myself. Like, I set out saying, I'm going to finish this palette, I'm going to do it. And so because I had that in my mind, I had to keep going. What do you think about panning colors, formulas you find out you don't like? Well, moving forward, I don't think I'm going to push myself to finish things to the extent that I did with the Vice LTD, because I've learned a lot of lessons. In general, with panning, I've learned a lot of lessons over the last couple of years, and I'm going to be easing down on the intensity of my panning and focusing less on finishing products that I hate, as long as I've properly learned the lesson and I'm not gonna make the mistakes again in the future, because that's the important thing. I think that sometimes people don't use things or stop using them, and then like a month or 2 later they buy the same kind of product, and then it's like a repeat cycle where it's like, why did I buy this? Toss it. A couple months later, oh, I'm gonna buy this pretty thing. Wait, I don't like this, why did I buy it? And it kind of like, I've noticed that sometimes while watching people who do like decluttering and stuff like that, where it's like, I'm gonna get rid of this thing because I don't like it, and then a couple months later they buy a variation of the exact same thing, and it's like, you did not learn your lesson. I mean, to each their own. People can do whatever they want to do with their own money and their own time and their own makeup. You know, it's not none of my business. But for me, I've learned a lot about my preferences, and I know certain things to avoid, and I will be applying that in the future, and I'm not going to force myself to finish things that I know I don't like and that I know I have no plans on repurchasing in the future. But if I use something once and I'm like, I don't like it, and then I get rid of it, and then I'm like, maybe I should try this again, that's a problem. And that's what I want to avoid, and that's why I find panning so useful. So if I come into any problems with the Burgundy x9 palette, I will do my darndest. I will try every single possible way to make something work for me, and if it doesn't work, then I'm gonna call it quits. Andy Lynn asked, have you always experimented with bright colors on your eyes, or is that something that came with panning palettes to get better use out of the shadows? I've pretty much always been a creative makeup person when I've worn makeup, and my makeup phases have really just been that. They've been phases where I've gone back and forth with how much I've loved makeup. Like in junior high, I'd wear blue mascara, and in high school I've talked about my glitter face with no makeup. I know. I wore black lipstick in high school. I did a lot of weird stuff, and I loved it because it was a form of expression, and that's the way I think of makeup still. But then there was time where makeup was more about convenience and less about like playing with it. So makeup was like gold eyeshadow, pink lipstick. Like I wasn't thinking outside of the box, and I didn't have a lot of products, and it wasn't a big concern for me. You know, like thinking more about like university time, makeup was more of like a means to an end, and it wasn't something that I played around with or something that I really thought of. Like when I went out partying and I went out to karaoke and stuff like that, like I do glitter eyes and I do crazy bright things or weird stuff, but it wasn't as much of a hobby and as much of a love as it is now. And I've never really been scared of using vibrant things, although I was more into vibrant eyeliner than vibrant eyeshadow before. I was more of a neutral eyeshadow person and a vibrant eyeliner person, but that was really because I didn't know what to do with eyeshadow, and I didn't have a whole lot. I didn't have a lot available to me, and I wasn't really interested in it for a while. It took a while for me to get interested in eyeshadow as opposed to other products. It was something that I just did not like on myself until I started using it more. So, you know, it's kind of a yes and no answer, that I have never really been afraid of various forms of makeup, but I've definitely learned more from panning, and I've been practicing more and experimenting more, and I think that my eyeshadow techniques and stuff have improved like 100% from where I started last year. Lipstick and Bygone asked, what are some tips for shades that I really don't wear, like dark shades in a palette? You just have to try them. Like there's really no specific magic key I can give someone to help them like magically finish a shadow. You have to want to try it, and you have to want to play around with it a little bit, and you might hate it, and it may not be for you, and in that case I would say don't focus on it. Don't worry about finishing it for the sake of finishing it, but like keep in mind in the future that you don't like those kind of shadows, and if you buy them, you're gonna have to be okay with not using them. Like if they come in a palette, you're gonna have to be okay with not using them. But I would really just say try them in different ways, because you might surprise yourself. If you are a person who does like a light wash of color on your lids, try playing around with some dark shadows, try following tutorials. Not necessarily like before a big event or before work or school, but like set aside some time, like half an hour or so. Find a tutorial you like, some look that you really want to create, and practice it. Just try it. Maybe it's a winged eyeshadow look, maybe it's just something really blown out and smoky. I really like dark shades for that kind of stuff, like the really dark, dramatic, smoky eyes, and they're not for everyone, but sometimes they're fun, and sometimes you might like them, because I really did not think that I was going to like dark, smoky eyes until I started using dark shadows, and then I was like, I love them. And using dark shadows to like deepen the outer portion of my eye, I never would have really thought about that before until I started doing it, and then I went, I like this a lot, and I love dark shadows, like black matte eyeshadows. I love them now, and I never really thought that I would, but I think they are absolutely necessary, and I use them all the time because they work so well at emphasizing things. So really the only tips I can give for you is just to try a variety of different things. Just try, just play, and you'll either learn that you like it or you'll learn that you don't. And I think either way, if you've learned something, you've won. Skater Atu asked which eyeshadow formula is the easiest for you to go through and why. I would say glittery Urban Decay eyeshadows in a neutral color are the easiest right now. Something like Last Sin and Provocateur, because I can use them wet, I can apply them all over the lid, gone in no time. Really, really easy. And matte eyeshadows that are the same shade as my skin tone that I use to set my eyeshadow primer are incredibly easy to use because I literally set my entire eye area, and that's a lot of shadow. So that's really easy for me to do, for me to pan, because it's like every single day usage, and fair amount of space. I don't have huge eyes, I don't have a lot of lid space, but it's a lot of eyeshadow to go from your lash line to your eyebrow. And the last questions come from XOXO Foodie, or Emily, and she has 5 questions for me. And the first question is, how or what has this palette taught you about your preferences for future colorful palettes? So I've really already touched on this, but like I said, I'm going to be more considerate about the palettes I purchase in the future and what shades they contain, and I'm really going to be thinking about, are these shadows I'm going to be using? Are these shadows that I will use? Are these shadows that I know I won't use? Some things I'm just not drawn to, like in general, I don't really like blue and green. I will use them every now and then depending on the exact color and finish, but in general, blue and green shadows I do not reach for often. So if a palette has mostly blues and greens, I will not be buying that because it would not be worth the money. Her second question is, what were or has become some colors or finishes you never, or at least for a while, want to use again? Glittery Urban Decay eyeshadows in general, like the real glitter bombs. There was a couple in there. Like there was a gold shade, I think it was Blitz. Blitz and Disco were like really glittery shades that I just never want to use again. Glittery Urban Decay eyeshadows are just terrible. So much fallout. Ugh, awful. Like the big chunks of glitter. Also dark, like jewel toned shadows with glitter in them. Like the purple and the green and the blue. Like sparkly blue eyeshadow, sparkly green eyeshadow, I don't want to see. No. I don't want to use them. I don't want to see them. Nope. Her third question is, was there a most disappointing shadow? That would 100% be Goddess and Floss, that dark green and that dark blue full of glitter. Those were really disappointing because they look pretty, and when you swatch them they look nice. And like Goddess, that blue shade was the last one I finished, and it looked so pretty when you swatched it. And when I put it on my lid, it was freaking awful. And I mean, it wasn't just kind of bad, it was bad. Like fallout everywhere, it was patchy, it faded within a couple of hours. Like I hated that shadow so much. Her fourth question, were there some shadows that you feel if they had been reformulated a certain way could have been better? Absolutely. I think those shades could have been better, the blue and the green. I liked the formula of the shadows like Chase that didn't have glitter in them, but like were super metallic and shimmery anyway, even without using, like I said, Fix Plus. So like if there was more shades like Chase, like I liked Last Sin and Provocateur too, and even they were like a little bit glittery, but they performed so much better. Crystal was a little glittery. As much as I liked it, I wish it was more along the lines of Chase, like a pale, like Cinderella blue shadow like that was in the same formula as Chase would have been like amazing. I want more shadows that are like the formula like that. That would have been a lot better. And I wish there was a more colorful matte shade in this palette. Like having 4 neutral matte shades was kind of a letdown. I think if they had a color, they had 2 purples that were very similar to each other, and I think if they had made one of them matte, that would have been a much better experience for me. And the fifth question is, was this palette worth the price tag after seeing these shadows in action? Yes and no. If I knew what I knew now, like without having panned this palette and this palette just came up for sale, I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't buy it because there wouldn't be enough of a reason for me to buy it. But the lessons that I learned, and as long as I can properly apply them to myself in the future, like that's worth more than what the palette cost me. And Road Stripe. Road Stripe was totally worth the money alone. I know it sounds ridiculous, but like I was honestly almost going to buy, and I honestly might have bought a second of the Vice LTD Reloaded palettes for Road Stripe if they hadn't released it as a single, because that shadow was just everything and so totally worth it. So, you know, I'm gonna have to, I guess, say yes, even though I would not repurchase this palette. If it became available again, I would not purchase it. I would not recommend it for people to purchase because I don't think the formula stands up that well, but I recommend panning to people, because I think you would learn your own lessons and you don't need to use the palette I use to do that. So that is everything for my Pan That Palette Q&A video. I don't think I'm going to do a reflections video because I think I got to touch on everything that I wanted to say, specifically about the lessons I've learned from panning this palette, and I really got to talk about road stripe, which is always a good thing. So anyway, if you are struggling with panning a palette, don't forget to take breaks. You know, play around with stuff, figure out what works for you, stop if you need to. If you have any questions, if I can be of any more help, let me know in the comments down below. I will do my best to help you in any possible way I can. Feel free to reach out to me anywhere you can find me. If you're not comfortable with just leaving a comment, send me a message, send me an email, whatever you want. I will respond to you as soon as I can. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Bye.